next up is going to be Lily Troia, who's our engagement manager here at Altmetric. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Lily now, who's going to give us an introduction to Altmetric Explorer for institutions and kind of some of the new stuff that we've rolled out recently, including and beyond some of the things that Jean's already covered so far today. So Lily is an academic librarian and archivist with a background in digital scholarship, copyright, and research data services. As engagement manager at Altmetric, she works directly with those who want to better understand the reach and impact of their research, helping scholars, institutions, funders, publishers, government organizations, and nonprofits maximize the potential of Altmetrics by aligning data analysis with strategy and mission. So go ahead and take it away, Lily.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. And thanks to Stacy for organizing such a great event. And thanks so much to our panelists. Really great to hear such diverse, unique perspectives and all the exciting things folks are doing with this data. So I'm going to talk to you about now some of the stuff that Jean alluded to in terms of new updates, but also just a kind of a refresher of all the things that we've really added and enhanced to the platform recently and an eye on kind of actionable use for you. Next slide. So our goal with the Explorer platform, is to help you really quickly uncover and track, diverse research attention that's targeted at, the audiences and value channels of attention that are really of value to you and your purposes. And, one of our goals, because we have a lot of different users of this platform, is to make it, a simple, easy to use kind of system where you can quickly search and filter across research outputs, both from your institution and across our entire database. Currently, we have over 11 million mentioned research outputs that we're tracking that have attention of, I think, some 14 million plus that we're tracking. And just from this research output list, you can sort by mention source. A lot of organizations want to track recent mentions, and then we can save those searches, right? So you can get alerted about all the new mentions across your organization's publications, say every week or in the past 3 days. And then we can also export all that data. And, Chris Billick at University of Michigan talked a lot about the API, and we'll have a breakout session with one of our developers, Shane, next. But that gives you some potential to take this data either as a CSV or an API or connect to the API and do more with it. Next slide. And so when we integrate your data into the platform as an institutional dashboard, you get this custom filtered ability to look at verified outputs and publications across your departments, your grants. We can structure that hierarchy however you like. And that also gives you the ability to track by authors and researchers and do, longitudinal views that are broken down in a more granular manner. Next slide. And the way that we can do this, we have a couple of different methods. And basically what we would do when we create your institutional dashboard is we integrate with with an existing publication system. So you heard University of Michigan talk a little bit about that integration with symplectic elements. So that's one way that we can pull that publication data from you directly. We support lots of different research information management systems. We can connect to your institutional repository. Some customers have a homegrown database or a custom API or XML feed that we connect to. We can also work with Harvard or Vivo profiles, and Commonwealth Fund is an example of a client where we are actually tracking their URLs. These are not publications in scholarly journals mostly. So we are using a CSV uploader, and this year our development team managed to roll out this new administrators panel. So you as often a small maybe organization or an organization that doesn't have one of these more robust research information management systems can really control and maintain the publications that you're tracking through the Altmetric Explorer in your institutional dashboard. Next slide. So then, as Jean talked about quite a bit, which is really exciting, we have this new highlights dashboard as well. So we really wanted to bring useful and interesting information front and center. And this gives you a snapshot of total mentions and outputs with mentions, not only across the full database, but across any search or departmental or author view that you might be looking at. We do an attention breakdown by source type, which includes percentages by those source types, which I think is a really good, valuable snapshot of information. This, live updating feed of most attention receiving outputs, as well as recent attention. And then we'll highlight, the sources where most of your mentions are coming from, as well as where most of your publications are occurring in terms of journals or collections. So this is again, a really great opportunity to see some of that aggregate and insightful information up front, and hopefully not have to dig for it quite as much. Next slide. And then, of course, we want you to be able to fine tune and create much more custom granular searches that give you the opportunity to dig through the database or your publication data in a really meaningful way. So with the new UI switch, you can quickly toggle between your institutional data and the full database. We can do a quick search across keywords that will include titles and or collections and your departments as well if you have data integrated with the platform. And then the advanced search gives you a lot of more really deep capacity to do some really in-depth searches like PubMed queries to search for mesh terms or pharmacological actions. We can limit our searches by things like just to books or book chapters or just data sets or clinical trial records. This is stuff that really can function in a very specific way for you and your team. And if you want help with this stuff, please do let us know, and we can help you work out ways to create queries that are really going to get you the kind of information that you need and that will inform decisions going forward. Next slide. So one thing you can do just by sorting is to quickly identify examples of broad influence or say interdisciplinary attention. Here on the screen I've highlighted patent data or most policy mentions. So just within a quick sort across a topic or our publications ourselves, we can isolate these outputs that have received really important attention in different categories. I'd really encourage you to always go beyond just the aggregate attention score. That's a really great indicator of widely discussed research, but sometimes the most impactful attention comes from more specific channels, a couple policy mentions, maybe with a piece of research that wasn't chatted about, broadly on Twitter and mainstream news. Next slide. So this is a couple examples just that I pulled out of book tracking also that I wanted to talk about. So, Altmetrics really do work well for non-article formats also. And because now a lot of publishers are tracking at the DOI level, so they're assigning DOIs at the chapter level, we can actually see unique attention, not just for an entire book, but for different chapters and topics, especially valuable if it's a multi-author edited book, etc. And rich data like Wikipedia mentions, book reviews, patents, etc., that often really reflect a much more of an engagement around books and discussions around scholarly books versus just a bookmark or a download. Next slide. Oh, this is actually the screenshot examples from the previous slide of policy and patent recommendation or references. So you can see here, as Jean or as Stacy talked about, you can connect out and link to the actual patent application, so you can audit that information that way. And again, a research output with a score of 9 might not pop into your your sphere of analysis if you're just looking at the top score attention receiving outputs. So looking at those specific source types is really valuable. And then here we've got policy recommendations as well. That's fine, you can go forward. We have this interactive timeline. Our goal is to allow you to do some longitudinal analysis alongside immediate analysis. Really powerful if you're in a communications capacity and want to benchmark activities, or maybe you're an individual researcher or a librarian and you go to a conference or you have some sort of social media campaign. This can give you that ability to see really visually the impact of those kind of outreach activities and to see what kind of conversation they've driven. Next slide. We have an example from Queensland University of Technology. They started tracking recent mentions across their outputs and noticed some interesting activity and blog coverage that was really vital to a specific field that they would have missed, again, if they were only scanning for the top attention receiving outputs of all time. And when they relayed that information to researchers as a form of engagement, an added service, they found that the researchers and department were really excited about this. So they started then reporting. There's a couple animations, you can click forward on this, reporting to the schools and departments about recent mentioned research. And Michigan is a great example of where they are using this API often to embed lists of recently mentioned outputs again to highlight things that are being talked about right now. Next slide. Our mentions tab in the old platform and new platform gives you this really great ability to dive into those mentions and the details around them. We can create custom searches around specific sources themselves or source types. Has the New York Times mentioned our research? This key science communicator on Twitter. We can save all that data. We can add country filters as well. And then this data as well can be exported as a CSV or connected to directly via JSON API endpoint. Next slide. And in terms of really analyzing and highlighting and understanding global reach, we offer distribution maps for 4 unique source types: Twitter, Facebook, news, and policy. Really great to get a nice picture of where your research is being discussed or where certain research topics are being discussed. And this data is also exportable or connected to via the API. And you can also click through on these maps or the hyperlinks on the side, so you can really dive into those mentions directly from this visualization. Next slide. An example of VU Amsterdam, where I had the fortune of visiting in April, was charting societal attention and a particular climate change piece of research. They used Altmetric data to see both global reach and understand how different trends and things like hurricane season led to changes in patterns and attention over time. Next slide. Finally, I just wanted to mention, if you have not played around with our custom report feature, if you have access to the platform, I'd really encourage you to do so and reach out to us if you need any help. This is a great way to engage with folks and stakeholders that might not be in the platform themselves, or to just keep a running link where you can see updated information about various research conversations. These reports can be built and created in a modular way around your needs, and they link only out to the public facing details pages, so you can share them with anyone. And they're a live updating URL or a PDF certainly, but you can get this report with new information that's being added. Next slide. And then finally, we have had a little conversation thus far about the API, and Shane's going to do a great breakout next. But I just wanted to mention, the API is again accessible from all the places in the platform where you can access the CSV exports. And I think what excites me as a tech adjacent person is that it gives people who are not developers or programmers this opportunity to collaborate in a way by creating queries in the Explorer that meet their discovery needs, and then sharing that with someone who can open it up in the API and do the programming end of things. All right, I think that's next slide. It might be it. Oh, I have my little animation. So yeah, thanks so much. I do regular trainings with our customers and can do small group demos. So if you ever have any questions, please do, reach out to me. I'm happy to chat more, and definitely want to make sure that you feel like you get the most out of the tool and the data.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lily. If folks have specific questions about Altmetric or any of the features that Lily shared with us just now, if you could actually put them into the chat function and send it to organizers, to all attendees. We seem to be encountering some technical difficulties with the questions panel within the GoToWebinar control panel, but we will be able to see any questions that you share with us via chat. Excuse me. So I guess I do have a question for you, Lily, and that is, which features do you find that people are most excited about or are using the most in their day-to-day reporting activities at institutions?
Let's see. I mean, it seems like, most people start out from a tracking our own outputs kind of perspective. Um, but once they start saving searches and setting up alerts regularly, I get a lot of feedback from folks that this helps them kind of stay on top of that data and really get on top of those insights that they might have missed already. I think that what Michelle is doing at Commonwealth Fund, this analyzing of key influencers, of tracking lists of specific mentions that are really important to you and your stakeholders is really a great strategy, because there's so much data available in the platform that it can get overwhelming or hard to sift through to the information that's really of value to you. So the features like in the new insights panel or the highlights panel, where you will get the top mentions from your who has talked about your research the most, being able to look at that, say, once you're employing a PubMed query, or doing some sort of journal-based search to really see who those influencers and where those discussions are happening, I think is just a powerful source of data that you wouldn't get somewhere else. So I'm so happy that Michelle was able to present with us today and give us that insight and how she's able to do that. Does that kind of answer the question?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, great.
We seem to have a few more minutes before we wrap up, and no other questions coming in. Was there anything in particular that you wanted to highlight before we move on to the breakout sessions, Lily? If you kind of had a few extra minutes to talk about particular
Yeah.
features?
Yeah, and I mean, even more than features, I would say just in thoughts about analyzing the data, which we will talk about in strategy more, but there had been some discussion on the Twitter feed earlier today about, um, you know, uh, something well, the question was specifically about large multi-author papers, and that the top scoring outputs tended to be these very high profile, maybe often biomedical, really kind of mainstream popular topics, or things that are really kind of on the cutting edge of discovery and science. But does that really indicate, say, impact for an individual who might be among that huge author list? And my response on Twitter, and what I try to encourage folks to do when I work with them, is, to step back and really think about, the sources of attention that are really of value and that align with your goals. And like I said, we'll talk about this more in the other session down the line. But the score itself is, again, just an indicator of conversations and attention. And what can be much more rich in data are those, unique individual mentions in very specific source categories that reflect this kind of development, say, in innovation that a patent does, or influence in a community that a policy recommendation might. So, I think the ability to really focus on those sources of attention within the platform and customize them for your needs and goals is one of the things that I think is the most powerful about the platform.
Excellent. Yeah, it's been so cool to be kind of paying attention to this field, or working in this field like you and I for so many years, because just how fast everything's grown and how much Altmetric and other providers in this space have all the different data sources, how diverse they are, the uniqueness of each individual provider. I think we're doing an amazing job in terms of kind of showing insights like Jean was talking about earlier. So it's been really, really cool, even like without the Altmetric hat on, but just the Altmetrics nerd hat on, to kind of watch that grow over time, and to know that, this is going to continue to grow. We're going to be able to continue to get really interesting, useful kinds of data to the people who can use it for various activities at their organizations. So that's been really, really cool. And I think you make a great point, and that it's important to keep in mind.